Hello everyone, welcome to another lecture of control systems. In today's lecture, we are going to see about the stability analysis of your first and second order systems. So previously we have seen what is your first order system and what is your second order system and how their root characteristics and their step response look like, or in terms of their characteristic equation, right? So we have seen this much, and in today's class I'm going to talk to you about the stability of these first and second order systems. So what is the stability have to do with our Laplace transform is what I'm showing here. So you have a control system. Let's say our response function is taken to be c of t, that is the output response of your given system. And now what I do is when I apply my Laplace transform to that C of t, I'm going to get it as C of s. And what is the formula for my Laplace transform? So my Laplace transform formula is something like this. C of s is equal to integral of C of t e to the power of minus st dt. So this is my Laplace transform, and let's just say that my C of t is 1, and if I'm integrating this e to the power of minus st, I'm going to get something as 1 by s, right? After making few substitutions, I'm taking a t equal to 0, then I'm putting my c of t equal to 1. So the point I wanted to show you is that 1 divided by s. So I can tell you that for a system, for this control system, the Laplace transform works mainly with the denominator, right? After applying the Laplace transform, I'm getting this 1 by s, and that is working with your denominator. So, or the denominator of a fraction in s plane is called as the poles, because if this is the format for your s plane representation, that is s minus z upon s minus p. So your zeros comes in the numerator, they occupy the numerator of the fraction, and your poles occupy the denominator of the fraction. So a simple analogy or a simple illustration shows that your stability or the Laplace that works for your control systems are operating on the poles of the system. So the zeros are less significant because all the characteristic equations of the first and second order systems come in the denominator, right? You have seen it. Now you can just think back on what we have seen. You can say that it happens at the denominator level. So now let's do some case by case study on the stability of some of the control systems that we have seen till now. So for my case 1, I have my C of s is equal to 1 upon s plus a. So I am going to write two things here. I'm going to write the pole for that C of s, right? I'm going to write the pole that is at minus a, because s plus a equal to 0, s is equal to minus a, and then my C of t, that is my inverse Laplace. I can apply the inverse Laplace transform for this, and I'm going to get that to be e to the power of minus at. Okay, I'm having a pole at minus a, and then my system response at e to the power of minus at. Now let us see how we plot this. So for my s-plane plotting, I'm going to use that notion s is equal to sigma plus j omega, where my sigma is the real axis, right? The values of sigma define my real axis, and the value of omega defines the imaginary axis. So that is my s-plane plot shown in left hand side. And on the right hand side, I have my C of t. I have my response C of t versus time. And now I'm plotting that e to the power of minus at. So that comes out to be a decreasing exponential. So I'm assuming that a is positive, right? So unless and until it is given explicitly that a is defined by default, it's a positive variable. So e to the power of minus at is a decreasing exponential. And if I see the correlation with my pole plot, so my pole is at minus a. So the pole is at minus a, which is on the left hand side of my s-plane, right? So the pole is occupying the left half of the s-plane. So this is significant because as you will, as we'll be seeing in the later half of the lecture. So I'll just say that my pole is at the left half of the, the left side of the s-plane. And my decreasing exponential is a stable system because e to the power of minus at tends to 0, because after a certain period of time, after some time, this input, this like e to the power of minus at is gonna become 0. So a decreasing exponential is a stable, it gives a stable system. So That is your case 1. So I can write that what I can write from this two graphs, what I can infer or what is my inferences even without CT. So even if I didn't have the system response, when I didn't have my CT also, I can tell that the system would be stable if my poles, no, if I know the poles of my system and if my poles lie on the LHS, right, on the left side of my S plane, then I can just call that to be a stable system. So I don't need my C of T. So that what I'm trying to tell is I don't need both, because I can just tell, you give me the pole, you give me a characteristic, you give me a system, I can easily tell the pole, right? Whereas finding the inverse is a bit more difficult. So I can easily tell the pole, and if the pole is on the left side, I'm telling that my system is stable. So let's see whether it's true or not. Now let's take another case, which is the contrary to the first case, that is 1 upon S minus A. So for this case, my pole is at plus A because S minus A equal to 0, S is equal to plus A. And my C of T, or the inverse Laplace transform, is given by e to the power of at. Now e to the power of at is a rising exponential or it is an increasing exponential, so that value tends to infinity. E to the power of at, it keeps increasing till infinity. So that is not stable. So that I wouldn't call that to be a stable system. And now if I see my pole representation, my pole is on the right hand side. So I can tell that if the pole occupies the RHS, then my system is unstable system. All right. So from my case 1 and case 2, I have these two conclusions that on LHS, if my pole is on the left hand side, that is a stable system, and if my pole is on the right hand side, the equivalent response is an unstable system. All right, good. So now I am looking at my case 3, so where I have a complex pole. I have A plus JB and A minus JB. So that pole is at minus A minus JB and minus A plus JB, because S plus A plus JB equal to 0. And now I am taking the response C of T to be e to the power of minus A plus JB into T plus B into e to the power of minus A minus JB into A. All right. So now how does this response plot to? Let us see. So it's not, again, I have to plug in some values for T and I have to plot it. It's not very straightforward plot from my C of T, but I know how it is going to look. So I'm just going to draw it for you. But you don't have to know, how, but you can just, take this for as it is, because we are only discussing the stability for the system. So we are not interested in finding the response C of T. So let me draw it for you and show it to you what happens. So these are the poles I have for my minus A minus JB and minus A plus JB. I've shown with my X on the left side of the S plane. So again, my poles are complex, but they are occupying on the left side. So they come on the left side, and I am again seeing a stable response. So this again, the case 3 is proving my case 1, which means if my poles are on the left side of my S plane, then I am having a stable system. So which means on the right side is where your instability lies, and on the left side you are talking about a stable system. So that is as simple as it gets, right? So that now let's see a case 4, which is contrary to case 3. So where I am going to have complex poles, and these poles are going to be on the right hand side. So let us see that example also. And now you can guess it before I do this that it's going to be unstable, because it is coming on the right hand side of my S plane. So these are the poles A minus JB and A plus JB, and my C of T is going to be e to the power of minus A plus JT plus B e to the power of minus of. All right, good. And now I'm going to do the two plots for you, and then so the pole, the imaginary pole, is gonna come on our right hand side, JB minus JB. So I'll use my so these are the poles, A plus JB and A minus JB. And you see, you see the response, it is unstable. So the response C of T is increasing. So it's like, it's rising, and it is tending towards infinity, or it's getting unbounded, or it is an unstable system. So again, for your complex conjugate, so these are complex conjugate, right? Plus or minus JB we have, so that makes it complex conjugate poles. On the right hand side is an unstable system. Yes, so what is happening is with all these cases, what we have seen is your left hand side is the safe zone for your control system, and your right hand side is not so. So it's a danger zone for your control system. So you don't want your roots to be on, or your roots meaning your poles to be on the right side of this plane, so that you move towards instability. Then case 5 is a very simple case because I am doing 1 by s and 1 by s square, and you all know that my 1 by s is my pole at s equal to 0, and my 1 by s square is my double pole at s equal to 0. And this also represents my step input and my ramp input, right? So these are my step and my, so a pole at s equal to 0 lies in this manner, and a double pole means I have two poles at the same position. That's what your double pole means. And now I can tell your ramp, your response is going to look like a step signal and a ramp signal. So you all know how that looks. But what about the stability? Because this is neither on the right nor on the left. So that's why I've kept this case, because it is at the center. It is at the center, and it is not, you cannot call that to be a right side or a left side. And in terms of stability also, I can give you a diplomatic answer. We're going to give a diplomatic answer, and we're going to tell this is partially stable. So this is neither unstable nor fully stable. What happens is, if my step response is giving a constant value for a time which is within bounds, then it is a stable system. Let's say t is equal to 100. So that t is equal to 100 makes it a bounded system. So I can contain this step and ramp within that t equal to 100. So that is your stable system. Let's say my t is from 0 to infinity. Then what happens? Your signal can extend from 0 to infinity. So that makes it your unstable system. So I would call this case 5 to be marginally stable, partially stable, or both stable and unstable. In different books, they have given it in different manner. So, but we have to see that it is both. It is a bit of both. So coming to case 6, I am talking about only your imaginary roots. So this is also very much needed. So we have to with the 6 cases, I want to just show you all the places that the roots can occupy in my S plane and what happens to the stability, because now from just the location of the pole, I am able to tell about the stability of the system, right? So that is a very, very big thing. That is what we have learned in your previous unit, time response analysis. So this S-plane plotting this representation of my control system in your Laplace domain is going to make it easy for me to judge and tell the stability by just looking at its pole diagram. So now what I am having here for my poles at plus or minus j omega. So I take the C of t, I get 2 cos omega t, which is a sinusoidal periodic, and that is a stable system. I know that my sinusoids are producing stable systems, and then you can see the poles here. They are imaginary and they are conjugate. So they are imaginary, they are conjugate. The real part is 0, so they are lying on the imaginary axis. So they also contribute to a stable system. All right. So this is these are the 6 cases we get. Right? We can have, and so yeah. So this we can now by I can tell you, like, what I'm writing here is a system's stability can now be confirmed or can now be predicted by just looking at the poles of that system. So because of this generalization we have done with this cases 1 to 6, I can express the stability in terms of the pole locations. Good. Let's do one example. So we'll do an example here. I am having a characteristic equation of A0s by plus A1 equal to 0. Also, when I say characteristic equation, it is 1 upon A0s plus A1, right? If I write it as a characteristic equation, you have to understand that it is an equation of a denominator. So the characteristic equation makes sure that whatever the equation that comes after that is a denominator equation. It is not a numerator equation. So that much you must know. So here I've just put this 1 upon, but in your textbook it is just written as A0 S plus A1, and that is your characteristic equation. So now what are the poles? I'm getting the pole at minus A1 by A0, and I know my A0 and A1 are positive, so which means my pole lies on the left hand side. My pole is on the left hand side, and that is going to make my system stable. So I can just tell, I don't have to do inverse Laplace transform. I don't have to know what is my input. I don't have to know anything about the other things. I can just tell by this position of my pole that my system is going to be stable. See how good it is. That is what this unit is about. So we are going to see in the coming lectures about the stability of your system. So the stability analysis of the system, and we have few tests to tell, because if you have a polynomial characteristic equation, finding the poles may not be easy, because here you are having everything as a factorized form. So for factorized form, getting the poles are easy, but if you have a polynomial, say s to the power of 5 plus s4 plus s3 plus s2 plus s to the power 1 equal to 0, you won't be able to factorize it so easy, and factorization could be very, very time consuming. So for that case, we have few tests like Hurwitz criterion and the Routh array criterion, which we'll be seeing in the coming lectures. So for now, I can find the poles for this characteristic equation, because it is in a factorized form, that to be s is equal to minus 2, 1 plus or minus 2j. So if I plot these poles, what do I get? I get my complex conjugate poles, complex conjugate imaginary, these to be on the right hand side. So the complex conjugate poles are on the right hand side, whereas my s equal to minus 2 is on my LHS. So I can say that one of the root is stable and the other two is unstable. So if I have to just give one word, then I am going to call this system as unstable. But if someone is telling, you can give, you have some flexibility, then I would call this to be a partially stable system, because it is stable for my s is equal to minus 2. If somehow I tune my system to work with only that pole, then I will be using, I'll be operating at the stable condition. So the system will be stable for s is equal to minus 2. Good. So now I am going to introduce you another topic. It's about the stability, but something different here. That is, what if the poles are not directly computable? So let us say I have an equation, like I was telling. I have a big equation, and finding the poles are not so easy. So you cannot find the poles for every equation, right? So you have a much complex system like this, right? S to the power of n plus s to the power of n minus 1 plus s to the power of n minus 2. So you cannot find the poles. If I know the poles, I can tell about the stability. That is true. That was the first part of the lecture. Now that this topic, Hurwitz stability criterion, we are using, because we sometimes it's not very, the finding the poles is not so direct and easy. In that case, we go to some other techniques, and we have two such techniques which we'll be seeing in our lectures. The one is the Hurwitz stability criterion. The next one is the Routh array stability criterion. So today we will discuss the first one, and we'll see some numericals on it, and then we'll go to the next one. So what it means is, now I am writing few things here. So for that characteristic equation A0 to AN given here, the necessary and sufficient condition for stability is given to be delta 1 equal to A1 greater than 0, delta 2 is equal to delta 2 greater than 0, and delta 3 greater than 0. So we'll come to what is inside those determinants, because delta 1, delta 2 and delta 3 are my determinants, and it says that all the determinants must be positive. So if you have all determinants as positive, then your system is said to be stable. Okay, so let's do an example here. So I am having s to the power of 4, and that is the maximum we can do with pen and paper. So on a computing program like MATLAB or Scilab, you can do up to any number of order, like any polynomial can be solved with this Hurwitz arrangement. But now what I am going to do is, on a pen and paper and at the gate level, exam level, you are only looking at a maximum of s to the power of 4. So I'll see, we're going to do one or two more numericals on this. So I will see if I can show you s to the power of 5 and s to the power of 3. So that is the idea for the next numerical. So for today's numerical, we have a power 4, a polynomial of power 4 or order 4, right? So now what is my first, I'm going to write few rows here. So I'm going to write row 1, row 2, row 3 and row 4, because my determinant is going to be computed on a matrix which is going to be of size 4 cross 4. And I get that size 4 cross 4, I'll write it here. I'm getting that size to be 4 cross 4 because my polynomial is of the power 4. So whenever my polynomial is of the power 4, the determinant arrangement using the Hurwitz logic or the Hurwitz criterion, it's going to be of size 4 cross 4. All right. So when I have a polynomial s to the power of 3, right, if it starts with s cube, then my Hurwitz arrangement is going to give me a 3 by 3 matrix, and then I have to find the determinant on that 3 by 3 matrix. Then if I have s to the power of 5, then I get a 5 by 5 matrix, and then I have to find the determinant on that 5 by 5 matrix. Okay, so that is the idea. So in order to write these 4 by 4 matrix, I need 4 rows. It's having 4 rows and 4 columns, so I need those elements. I know I need that 4 row elements and my 4 column elements, and that is obtained by this row 1, row 2, row 3 and row 4. So here, if you take a quick look, my row 1 is the first 2 elements 1 and 8 written in reverse. My row 2 is the first 4 elements in reverse, and my row 3, I am just not using any of those, right? I'm using only the 3rd, 4th, 5th and 6th. So why I am doing that? And my row 4 is, again I'm shifting, I'm using only those last 2, 5 and 0. So if you see, if you look closely, I'm writing this 1 and 2. What I'm telling is, if you see every pair, that 8, 1 is used twice, 16 and 18 is used twice, 0, 5 is used twice. So that is the idea, right? You will have every pair occurring twice, pair or in single, they'll occur twice in your Hurwitz arrangement. So at least for this case, that is how we are writing. So you need to remember how to write these rows 1, 2, 3 and 4. So you can remember it in any manner. I've shown you very easily. So this is the easy way I do it. So this will be simpler also for you. So please, you can use that method. And now I have my rows 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm going to write these 4 rows, and that's going to give me my 4 cross 4 Hurwitz arrangement matrix. All right. So this is my 4 cross 4 Hurwitz arrangement matrix, and from this matrix, I'm going to find the determinants. So I'm going to start with, that is my, I'm going to show what are the determinants I'm going to find. I'm going to take my 1 by 1 determinant, that is delta 1. The yellow line marks my 2 cross 2 determinant, that is delta 2. The red line shows my 3 by 3 determinant, that is delta 3. And then the green line shows my delta 4. So my delta 1 is 8, it's greater than 0. So it has to be all positive, right? The condition for stability using Hurwitz arrangement is all the determinants must be positive. So I don't need the final value, I just have to see whether they are positive or negative. So I can easily tell my delta 2 is positive. So you all know how to do the determinant, right? So I have not shown there. I have shown for delta 2. So it is 8 into 18 minus 16 into 1. And how do you do a 3 by 3 determinant? You take the first row or the first column and then you do it. So I seriously assume you know how to do determinant, and if you are not aware, you can just see this and correlate on what's happening. And if you further have any doubts on determinant, you can just approach me. I'll be more than happy to take a class on finding determinants for you. So for my delta 4, also the same way, I'm taking the 4th row, and then I'm inside I'm going to use my 3 cross 3 matrix, right? How do I write that? Particular row and columns are getting excluded and all other terms are getting included. Makes sense? Okay, so I think I'll show this again for you. So the 4 cross 4 matrix is the maximum difficulty you see in exam. So let me write that for you. How do you get this 4 cross 4 determinant from this matrix? So I'm taking the bottom row. So let's take the bottom row 0, 0, 0, 5, and then I'm going to write the determinant representation. So I'm going to write 0. So when I take the first 0, I'm excluding that row and column which is aligned with that 0. So which means I'm getting the other elements 1 0 0 18 8 1 and 5 16 18. Then for the next 0, I'm excluding that row and column which contains that 0. So I'm going to get 8 0 0 16 8 1 and 0 16 18. For my third 0, I've shown in drawing, because if I drew all, then it will get very nasty on that matrix. So I have not done that. So you can see now how these are coming. These are the matrices, and then I just have to compute them because all are 0 and 2. So they all become 0. And then I'm left with only the fourth term. And if you see what's inside, that is my delta 3, right? What is inside that determinant is my delta 3. So I can write that 5 into delta 3. I've proven my delta 3 is greater than 0. So my delta 4 is also greater than 0. So this is my stable system. Thank you.